Ridley Scott is the answer you give whenever anyone asks, why would Quentin Tarantino retire after 10 films? I don't need to prove to anyone that he has lost his touch. His films do all the work for me.
Never confuse shit with chocolato. They may look the same, but the taste.
The sky is blue, and that goose is cooked. Happy belated Thanksgiving to all my American friends. Scott fell off, and all the same mistakes in House of Gucci are on display here in Napoleon. My personal favourite was during a generic palace coup montage where he allowed a character to literally say he is having a succulent meal.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest. Have a look at the headlock here. See that chap over there? Get your hand off my penis! This is the bloke who got me on the penis before.
Get some cups.
Why did you do this to me?
Hop in the car. Get some cups.
For what reason? What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? Oh, that's a nice headlock, sir. Oh, yes. I see that you know your judo well.
Drunken erudition and martial prowess, the Australian Ubermensch. And so death gets us all, and we all start to fall apart as it shreds our DNA with its icy talons. One of the few filmmakers who could stand upright until the end was John Huston with his film The Dead. It's the best short story from Dubliners, and so it helps that he had Joyce to work with. But still you find that even Huston's later work wasn't as good as the early and mid stuff. The Treasure of Sierra Madre or The Asphalt Jungle or my go-to feel-good film, Annie.
I'm gonna let you! She may be a mean, rotten little orphan! I'm not gonna let you kill her!
Huston made some incredible pictures. Throw a stone and you'll hit a classic. But let's then be honest with ourselves. Can anyone today really say with a straight face that they're like John Huston? There's a reason why pro athletes retire, and it is hubris to suggest that those engaged in intellectual and creative pursuits don't see a decline through age as well. Now I will play devil's advocate for a moment. A 21st century modality would see a filmmaker use performance-enhancing drugs to stay on top. I'm not a doctor, I rejected that shot at respectability, but I'm just saying maybe someone somewhere has done the research, perhaps in Russia, and have found a few potent, dare I say, wonder drugs that could aid the ailing artist. I know nothing except that maybe Scott could get back on top with an associate who isn't afraid to skirt the rules. Look mate, I don't care that you use it on animals, poke me with that little prick. Not that one! And this goes for all the young guns blazing away like Icarus in pursuit of Hollywood glory. Maybe N-acetyl-Samax 10 milliliters nasal spray is that extra strength superglue that'll keep you on a purple patch to heaven itself.
Congratulations.
Thanks. This can only mean one thing. It means that you like me.
Yes, we do.
At the very least, you'll feel sprightly for a bit, though you might get brain cancer. An alternative daemonic advocate is arguing now, you could perhaps pay attention to Kubrick and increase the time between films as you age. Whether intentional or not, I would hazard a guess that he was building back up his power levels between each film to remain in top form, as he recognized aging had impacted his abilities. Think about it like this. Old man Logan has a reduced healing factor as he ages. He's still the deadliest man on Earth, but it takes longer for him to bounce back between fights. It's the same with creativity. You go from writing all night, smoking 50 cigarettes and then running a few miles the next day, to writing during the day as part of an ordered routine with the occasional cig and coffee, to giving up the habit altogether because your grandkids convinced you to stop and you love them too much to continue, and now you're not even writing that much. You're simply enjoying a nice sunny California afternoon, sipping rosé and thinking about that night in your 20s when you went to a key party with an 8-ball in your pocket and a rocket in your pants. We are all trapped in samsara, but we can at least laugh while we're here. What was I talking about? Oh yes, the death of a great artist exemplified by his mishandled portrayal of a great man. His name is Napoleon Scott, and I'm going to begin with a few compliments. As much as I think Scott needs to retire, I still can't deny that he has the classical filmmaker in him. He eschews shallow focused talking heads in favour of actual shot compositions, some of which look good and brought me into that world. He doesn't engage in a meaningless series of fast cuts that possess zero creative direction under the guise of making making sure the film is dynamic. There are a few occasions, in particular the beheading of Marie Antoinette and the Battle of Waterloo, that had me nodding along thinking gorgeous stuff. Scott has some appreciation for the set design, and so he'll shoot a lot of scenes in a wide or mid shot that allows you to see the world these characters reside in. So there's obviously a knowledgeable man still running Ridley's meat sack, but it's not enough, as I'll continue with shortly. Another strength is the acting. While it does seem like Joaquin Phoenix was having trouble with the character, in general I think he did a good job, and the same goes for Vanessa Kirby as Josephine. One scene I found to be especially impactful was during the annulment of their marriage. I was deeply heartbroken by everything on screen, even though I was never invested in their relationship to begin with, and I think the thanks for that goes solely to the actors. Another noteworthy moment occurs during the siege of Toulon at the start of the film. From what I've read, experienced soldiers report a great deal of tension right up to a battle, but then experience calm during it, and Napoleon portrays this. Joaquin plays Napoleon as truly scared of death when the cannon fire begins, but he doesn't wilt under pressure. Instead, he wills himself to greatness by overcoming his fear so that he can possess his destiny. Finally, I can't ignore that we received a $200 million film that was made exclusively for adults. Thank you, Apple Plus. Win, lose or draw, that is a great thing, and it's a real shame that Napoleon wasn't a good film. Perhaps a better strategy would be to create 20 $10 million films made by younger artists who haven't lost their edge. More on that later. Film is a collaborative medium, and when all the parts are working with one accord, et anima una, you end up with a picture that levitates above us, suffused with psychic energy, alive for all intents and purposes, and it is awe-inspiring to behold. If these same partners are not in sync though, then the gears begin to crunch and the film wobbles, and ultimately you end up with a wet-hot mess on the floor. And not the good kind. So I'll give you a few examples. If you're one of the best actors around today and you're saddled with a bad script and a director whose vision is foggy, then can you really save it? While the actors are all very talented, and certainly Joaquin Phoenix is one of a kind, they didn't seem to be gelling with Scott and his vision, and it affected their work. It's a completely intuitive response to the film. The closest I could get to evidence is a comment from Ridley about Phoenix saying he didn't know how to approach the role right up until shooting, but I still think it's a reasonable statement. You simply know when an actor is alive and when they're just giving you what you would need to stitch together a film. Scott seems to have lost that sense, and Phoenix, near as I could tell, was not putting his soul into this role. There seems to be a disconnect between director and lead actor in Napoleon, and thus the gears began to crunch. The next element is the clash between the costume design and the editing team, in particular because of the color grading. Now Scott oversees it all, and so again it's ultimately on him, but let's walk through this. What is France known for? No, not capitulation. What is France known for? No, not pedophile apologetics. Jesus wept, they're known for fashion. Look at these paintings from the time of Napoleon. Gorgeous stuff. A passionate expression of the martial spirit that enlivened the French during the Napoleonic era. Have you heard the phrase, write what you know? Do you really think the painters of that time weren't engaged in a similar paint what you know? They saw and they recorded, though I will concede there was likely some mythologizing. And so I must say that period was aglow with vibrant colors and swaggering high tea men. Now take a peep at the color grading here. The costume design by David Crossman and Janty Yates is full of color, especially details that are occasionally visible during a close-up. Unfortunately, they've been robbed of their vibrancy by this faded lens that's placed over the image. Everything is washed out and joyless, as if to say, the past was never beautiful, there has never been a halcyon era. And what's worse, given the sun is steadily losing mass and its gravitational hold on the planet is weakening, our lovely abode, this pale blue dot, would have been approximately 490 inches closer to the sun back in 1815. So a biopic set during that period probably should be a touch brighter than a rom-com in 2023. Do you seriously expect me to sit here and praise Ridley Scott when he didn't even consider how the sun's mass ought to affect the color grading?
Future's now, old man.
The sun shines equally upon horror and joy, and it shone upon France throughout the Reign of Terror and the Reign of Napoleon. Perhaps you could have had a dull image during the Reign of Terror and then brought in a shift to brighter colours thanks to the rebirth Napoleon ushered into French culture, as this would reflect his influence upon the world. But I doubt they ever even considered something like that. These two departments could have worked together to create something superior, elevating one another, but they haven't here, and so the gears crunch a little louder. Finally, we have a script which conflicts with everything a biopic about Napoleon ought to be concerned with. David Scarpa of The Last Castle and The Day the Earth Stood Still fame was not the right man for the job. Never mind that this story probably should be told as a mini-series to do it any justice. The main issue is that Scarpa is not a talented writer. He can do everything a writer learns how to do after reading a book on it, but his work never sparkles because he doesn't have that X factor. Furthermore, he isn't interested in the Renaissance man who used his organizational power to change the world. Consider this line from Stanley Kubrick's script, which came as a voiceover from Napoleon after a victory. "From that moment on, I foresaw what I might be. Already I felt the earth flee beneath me, as if I were being carried away up to the sky." That is a gorgeous description of the Faustian spirit coursing through the blood of a great man of history, a man of destiny who would irrevocably guide humanity down a new path. There is nothing even remotely close to this in Scarpa's work. Napoleon isn't eloquent or educated. He's presented as a man-child whose characterization is indistinguishable from that of the Napoleon in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Consider this moment regarding Napoleon's expedition to Egypt, which is narrated by an omniscient being in the Kubrick script. Napoleon took along 150 distinguished scientists, intellectuals, and artists equipped with libraries and scientific instruments. They would found the Institute of Egypt, do the preliminary survey work for the Suez Canal, and unlock the key to hieroglyphic writing. Then go watch what Scott and Scarpa opt for when their Napoleon is in Egypt. They felt it was best to portray Napoleon grabbing a stool to stand up eye to eye with a mummy. They felt it was best to show Napoleon firing a cannonball at the pyramids? Bryan Johnson is probably insane and he'll probably fail, but at times like this, I sure do wish humanity could spit in the face of death and live in a world where we have Kubrick's vision of Napoleon. What could have been is like a dagger to the soul of a cinephile. Here's another bit of narration from the Kubrick script. This one's a little long, but bear with me. In the 5 years that followed, Napoleon gave proof of his brilliant legislative, administrative, and organizational powers. He created effective and enduring institutions of government, revitalized the economy, negotiated a concordat with the Pope, thus ending the religious rebellion in the Vendée, reconciled the bitterness between right and left by opening all careers to talent, and bringing into his government the best minds of the aristocracy and the ablest survivors of the revolution. Napoleon had secured the main social and material gains of the revolution, destroying privileged orders and modernizing the state. In exchange for this, he would now be given power far more absolute than any Bourbon monarch. Napoleon was a great man, and I mean that independent of time and space. A great man. A heroic European figure, and Kubrick recognized and celebrated that. Scarpa does not. Here's one more because I'm forlorn and want to marinate in my sorrow. Napoleon speaks in Kubrick's script of a vision he had of Josephine, who has at that point passed away. He says, "I wanted to kiss her, but she didn't want to kiss me. She slipped away the moment I wanted to take her in my arms." No, dear viewer, Scarpa's version of Napoleon doesn't have anything even remotely as beautiful as that. Instead, Scott and Scarpa give us some lame brain insights about the battle of the sexes and how behind every great man is a great woman. Here's a bit of dialogue from their version. Napoleon says, "I am just a brute that is nothing without you." Josephine replies, "You are just a brute that is nothing without me or your mother." Fuck off, you over-the-hill cunt and your moronic lapdog of a fucking writing partner. It goes without saying that only a great man like Stanley Kubrick could reasonably write about a great man like Napoleon. You must be on the same wavelength to get it. And so Napoleon is a bad film because all the pieces are not working together seamlessly. Director and actor appear not to be comfortable with the story. Costume design and color grading do not elevate each other. And the writer does not have an appreciation for the titular character. Now let's take a moment to think about Arctic Senelicide and the Manifesto of Futurism by Filippo Tommaso Marinetti. Consider these words. The oldest among us are not yet 30 years old. We have therefore at least 10 years to accomplish our task. When we are 40, let younger and stronger men than we throw us in the waste paper basket like useless manuscripts. They will come against us from afar, leaping on the light cadence of their first poems, clutching the air with their predatory fingers and sniffing at the gates of the academies the good scent of our decaying spirits, already promised to the catacombs of the libraries. Hollywood needs young men full of piss and vinegar who will come in and change the game. They then need mature men who can admit when their time is up and go with the tide of life towards whatever comes next, like Marinetti speaks of here. These old men need to accept their place on the iceberg into oblivion so the tribe can push forth into a merciless winter with certainty that the strongest amongst its ranks can ensure the group's survival. Now, okay, maybe we don't have to kill all the old filmmakers. I'll make it palatable, alright? I will. Perhaps there's a role model we can meditate upon. A role model Ridley Scott should consider emulating. And wouldn't you know it, there is one. His name is Quentin Tarantino.
And the Golden Globe goes to...
Knock the earth off its axis with your opening salvo of films, then move into a respected middle period where you take your style to its zenith before heading into victory lap films and finally riding off into the sunset to start a podcast with your oldest mate, publish some books and raise your family. Along the way, you champion other filmmakers and become a patron saint of cinema whose name will be respected so long as a film lover draws breath.
When people in the US were not familiar with my film, Quentin always put my films on his list. He's here. Thank you so much.
Quentin, I love you.
QT is playing the game of life as close to perfection as anyone can and deserves enormous praise for it. And on that note, Christopher Nolan fans, who it must be said put the fan in fanatical, need to get on their Messiah's case about using some of that money he's made to support the industry at large. Ari Aster has had less commercial success but already has a respectable producer tab on IMDb, supporting less established artists like Christopher Borgley and Alex Scarfman, and that'll be to his eternal credit. As Balaji Srinivasan says, win and help win. And frankly, Nolan needs to get into the icon game. Not that kind of icon. This kind of icon. The crux of the message is noblesse oblige. After all, how many summer houses does a man need anyway? Nolan talks a big game, but it's only his films he champions, besides a freebie to his old DP and the Snyderverse credits, and here's the key point. In the end, Nolan's work will stagnate just like Ridley Scott's, and what will be left of the righteous crusade? The solution is to develop acolytes, adherents, apostles, and position them in the Hollywood system to push your pro-film, physical effects, anti-streaming mandate from heaven, just like the Messiah himself did with his boys on the day of Pentecost. I clearly have too much time on my hands because no one cares about this stuff, and I doubt many will even get to the end of this video. To those who got here, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you have a good day, and I want you to know I greatly appreciate your support. Skip Napoleon and spend your time doing something more productive, like listening to Steven Seagal's masterful reggae song, Strut.
When the girls start to strut, you could look at their butt, you shouldn't do that. The girl dress is just a pity, not just there to cover her kitty.